Welcome back, readers and listeners. This is part 2 of Across the Creek. If you haven't listened to part 1, I urge you to stop here and listen to it first, and then come back to this one. The link will be in the description. To keep this and all other videos shorter, I will not be providing recaps of previous story events. If you've got a bad memory, I apologize for the inconvenience. As before, I ask you to open your mind, perhaps just a little wider this time, as we venture deeper into the tale. Now, on with the story. 2. The forest roads were not maintained by any sort of city crew or forest service, and as a result, the ride was very bumpy. John was forced to drive slow so that the car wasn't damaged during the trip. A big truck could handle these roads, no problem, but John didn't have a big truck. Just a little BMW that got him from home to work and back again. As long as he took it slow and watched out for big rocks in the road, he would be fine. Besides, he'd been up here before many times. He knew the road pretty well, and felt totally confident in his forest road driving abilities. The back seat was full of sleeping bags, warm sweaters, and 2 green folding camp chairs, as well as some dry goods like hot dog buns, marshmallows, and graham crackers. In the trunk was their 6-person tent for just the 2 of them, their portable charcoal grill, and a cooler full of root beer, Guinness to be exact, hot dogs, and chocolate bars. There was also a modest stash of marijuana under the seat. They wanted to have a good time after their so-called friends had theirs. "Is it much farther? I really have to pee," said Jenna as she squirmed uncomfortably in her seat. "No, we're almost there, but I can pull over if you want," said John, with a concerned look on his face. "No, I'll be fine, as long as it's not much farther." It wasn't. They arrived exactly 3 minutes after Jenna had made her urination proclamation. John stopped the car and parked it. He threw on the emergency brake just to be safe. Jenna threw open her door and slammed it before John could turn around. Jenna was in the woods doing her business just out of sight. John went to the trunk and began unloading and setting the supplies on the ground. The rocky forest floor crunched under his feet as he continued to unload the car. He heard a scree of rocks falling down a gentle slope. It was Jenna. She was back from her pine tree potty. "Get any on ya?" John asked with a big grin on his face. "Ew, no," said Jenna in a mock-offended tone. She put her hand into the pouch of her hoodie and pulled out a roll of toilet paper and held it up for John to see. "You had that in your hoodie this whole time?" asked John in a tone of surprise. Yeah, someone has to think around here. You probably didn't even think about TP, did you?" Jenna asked in a playful, accusatory tone. "Actually, no, but I brought this," he said as he pulled his brand new headlamp out of his back pocket. "So we can see where we're going in the dark," he said. "You mean so you can see where you're going in the dark? What am I supposed to use?" she asked, slightly concerned. "Well, I brought this," he said, as he raised a 4 AA-powered LED lantern. "It's a lantern that doubles as a flashlight," he said, as he demonstrated the device. "On, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off," he said quickly as he made the lantern perform a strobe light effect. "Stop it, you're gonna break it," she said lightly. "All right," John said, ready to carry the supplies down to the campsite. "You want to help me with this stuff? You can carry the lighter stuff and I'll get the heavy stuff. Deal?" he asked Jenna. "Okay, I'll take the tent, you take the cooler." They carried the supplies down a slope that flattened out down by a small yet fast-moving creek. "Wow," John said, in a long sigh of exultation. "This place is beautiful, oh my God!" While John had been in this forest before, he'd never been this deep. They had decided to try out this spot because they'd heard rumors of it from friends who said that no one ever went out this far. They wanted peace. They wanted quiet. As John and Jenna looked and listened, they found that they had exactly what they were hoping for. This was a campsite, but it hadn't been used in quite a long time by the looks of it. The places where people would sit around the campfire was overgrown with grass and forest foliage. The fire pit itself was grown over, and John had to pull the weeds around it in a 10-foot radius just so he wouldn't accidentally set the forest on fire. There was always someone setting some part of the forest on fire this time of year, and he didn't need it to be him this time. With the site cleared of fire hazards, Jenna set up the chairs and started rummaging around in the cooler. She was looking for a bottle of water so she could take an aspirin. She was getting a headache, and she thought she'd kill it before it got a chance to grow into a whopping migraine. "Jenna, come help me set up the tent before it gets dark," said John. "Okay, hang on," said Jenna from across the campsite. She popped 3 aspirin into her mouth and swallowed a half a bottle of water with them. Once they had finished the tent, John began to make the campfire, and Jenna blew up the queen-size air mattress with a battery-powered pump that ran on D-cell batteries. John used his hatchet to split some kindling and built a nice teepee of sticks in the fire pit. He reached into his pocket and brought out his gold Zippo lighter, flipped the lid, and struck it on his jeans, the way he had been shown as a kid on family camping trips. The smell of lighter fluid quickly disappeared once he shut the lid and slid the lighter back into his pocket. The kindling was going good now, and John began to place larger logs around the burning effigy. In no time at all, a roaring campfire was blazing, and their new favorite place in the world was primed for relaxation. It got dark early in the woods. The sun just couldn't cut through all those trees. It was about 5 in the evening, and already they could see the light starting to fade away. As it did, the campfire became more vibrant, and the first pinpoints of stars began to appear in the sky. Along with the stars came the nocturnal wildlife used to having the forest all to themselves. Bugs, bats, small rodents, God knows what else. As they looked up at the beginnings of stars, they could see the silhouettes of bats performing their sonar-guided acrobatics as they ate the plentiful bugs in the air. And boy, were there a lot of them. Weird bugs. Things that looked like they should be crawling and flying alongside dinosaurs in a prehistoric land. They knew that no one really ever came out here, and as a result, nature had taken over. 3. With the sun completely gone and night officially begun, John and Jenna could see the infinite clouds of the Milky Way galaxy among the standouts such as the constellation Orion and the planets Jupiter and Venus. They huddled as close as they could together in their separate camp chairs by the fire as they passed a cigarette-sized joint between the two of them. This is what they wanted. It was perfect. No drunk idiots, no loudmouthed girls who had no business being in the woods, just them and their love for one another. They cooked hot dogs on green sticks pulled from still living trees, which were carefully sharpened with John's pocket knife. They each had a pretty good case of the munchies, and both put away 3 hot dogs each, and were now preparing to make s'mores. As Jenna fumbled through the bags of food they brought, searching for marshmallows, a click-clacking sound came through the trees across the creek. A second later, there was a hollow thud on the ground near the campfire. Neither of them had been paying attention to the ground. John looked around with his headlamp to see what made the noise. Next to the campfire were 3 rocks. "Were there always 3 rocks here?" John asked Jenna. "I don't know. I think so," said Jenna questioningly. "Huh. I wonder what that was," mused John. 30 minutes and 4 s'mores apiece later, they completely forgot anything had happened in the first place. They grew tired as the night drew on and the fire died down. With the fire down to no more than a few glowing embers, John and Jenna went to bed in their oversized tent. A gentle sunlight and chorus of birds greeted the camping couple as they woke from their restful slumber. As John lay on the bed face up, he could see the pine needles that had fallen onto the tent as well as a creeping inchworm. John reached for his phone and started recording a video of the worm and the serene sounds of the forest morning. Jenna was slowly waking up. "Good morning," she said sweetly. Still recording the worm with his phone, John turned his head, smiled at her, kissed her, and said, "Morning. See the worm?" "Well, I was hoping to, but we both passed out last night," said Jenna with a mischievous grin on her face. "Oh, ha ha, very funny," said John in a sarcastic tone. "You want to get up? Go for a morning stroll?" asked Jenna excitedly. "You bet," said John. They shifted from side to side as they tried to leverage themselves off the air mattress. 4. Dressed for a good long nature walk, John and Jenna set out walking along the creek, deeper into the woods. The verdant smell of ferns and moss was strong and everywhere. John picked up a long stick and carried it with him for a while, using it as a walking stick. Jenna thought that if he only had a beard, he'd look like Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings movies. "Hey, John," she said, cracking a smile. "Huh?" he asked, preparing to answer her question. Then she stole away his walking stick, held it with one arm pointing to the sky, and shouted, "You shall not pass!" and then brought the stick with a hard strike into the ground. Birds flew away in an effort to escape the potential threat of predators. "God," he said, shaking his head slightly. "This is why we can't have nice things." Then he took the stick away from her and threw it deep into the woods across the creek. They were both too busy laughing to notice, but the stick never made a sound, and completely vanished once it crossed the rushing water and disappeared into the forest beyond. Their hike brought them to another long-forgotten campsite. This one was smaller and even more overrun with weeds. A small lizard was catching some sun on a rock when it felt the vibrations of their footsteps and hid itself in a crevasse under the stone. "Hey, look at this," John said, as he picked through the old fire pit. Sticking out of the ashes were a small set of antlers. He wondered who would have left these behind, especially in a fire pit, and then tried to pull them out. They wouldn't budge. He pulled harder. They came out a little more, and before he could stop himself, he was hauling not only the antlers, but the whole head and spinal column of a young buck. He dropped it immediately, brushing his hands on his pants. Disgusted, Jenna said, "Oh my God!" Yeah, I had no idea all that was in there. I thought it was just some antlers some hunters left behind," John said apologetically. "Go wash your hands off in the creek," shouted Jenna. John said nothing and did as he was told. When he was finished, they decided to walk back to camp. The whole dead deer thing really killed the mood, and John felt stupid for even touching the antler in the first place. 5. On the way back to camp, the mood had lightened, and they were joking again. No need to have a bad time because of something stupid like that. They would just get back, fire up the grill, and have a nice little lunch of more hot dogs. John thought that the woods were the only place where it was okay to eat hot dogs exclusively, and had to chuckle to himself at the thought. John was leading Jenna to camp when he stopped walking just as the campsite was in view. Lying up against the cooler, as if it had always been there, was the walking stick John had thrown across the creek. Still creeped out a little from the deer, John shouted, "What the fuck is this shit?" What is it?" asked Jenna, a little frightened. John stepped aside, and Jenna saw the stick. "You shall not pass," she thought, as her head swam with confusion. "What the fuck is this doing here? I threw this into the woods. Who's here? Hey! Hey!" John yelled into the dense woods. "Hey, calm down," said Jenna, trying to be rational. "It's probably just some kids messing around. School's out, you know." "Yeah," said John, wanting to believe her, needing to believe her. The fact that Jenna didn't believe it herself would not have helped the situation at all. But Jenna was strong and level-headed. She knew that it would do no good for them to both freak out, so she kept the secret truth to herself, and continued to extinguish the situation. "I think we should leave," John said, nervously. "Leave? But we just got here. I'm enjoying myself, and I don't want to let some kid ruin that for us," Jenna pleaded. A long time passed before John said anything. "You really think it was just some kids?" John asked, wanting to be comforted. "Yes, I really do. Let's start up the grill and have some lunch. If you still feel upset about it afterwards, we can go, okay?" Jenna asked, purposefully using her puppy dog-eyed look to get her way. She didn't say so, but she was hoping that he was still upset after lunch. She didn't want to stay either. But she didn't want to be blamed for cutting their trip short, so she kept her mouth shut and the illusion alive. They made more hot dogs on the grill, and once they both had some food in their bellies, they found that they did in fact feel better. "Better?" she asked. "Yeah, actually," he said with a growing smirk on his face. "Pot?" she asked. "You read my mind," he exclaimed as he brought out the stash box with the weed inside. He rolled them another joint, and they smoked it in the wonderful golden sunlight of the forest. John was drinking a root beer when he noticed a fly buzzing around his legs. He swatted at it, but it dodged him effortlessly. Upon closer inspection, this was no ordinary fly. It was all yellow with teardrop-shaped wings and a long proboscis. He had never seen a fly like this in his life. He had to wonder how that could be. The idea of ecosystems was too much for his stoned brain, and he just assumed that this fly was some kind of ancient insect that had survived millions of years out here in the woods with no consequence because the land was so pure and untouched. He wondered if the fly would bite him. It certainly seemed to be attracted to something on him. The goddamn thing wouldn't leave him alone. Eventually, he picked up his folding chair and moved it to the opposite side of the fire pit. Then he noticed that where his chair had been sitting was an empty root beer can. The fly wanted the sugar, not his legs. "Oh my God, I'm so stupid," he yelled. "Ha ha, I know," said Jenna, poking fun at him a little bit. They enjoyed the rest of the day, laughing with one another. Time got away from them, and soon it was almost time to start the fire again. "So we're staying?" John asked Jenna. "You want to?" Jenna asked back. "I guess. I don't really want to try to navigate these forest roads in the dark. We'll stay the night, pack up in the morning, have a quick lunch, and then we'll go," John said, feeling better now that they had a plan. They reenacted the night before, only this time, Jenna did see the worm. Thank you for coming back and joining me for the second part of Across the Creek. Again, if you like what you heard, please visit my Patreon page and consider supporting me as it helps me continue to write and bring these stories to you. Also, feel free to like and subscribe. I have lots more of this story to go, and there will be more as I write. So please come back and see what happens to these characters and see what they find across the creek. Thank you.